Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. You know we love to go in depth on a topic, and that's what we're doing again today. Today, we're going to be talking about wilderness survival and bushcraft. We've got all kinds of stuff to guide us today. Survival guides, expert advice, and we've even got some real-life survival stories.
This is going to be exciting.
It is exciting. Just picture yourself not just surviving out there, but thriving.
Yeah.
Using knowledge and skills to really live in harmony with nature.
It's really fascinating how bushcraft goes beyond just survival.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding the environment
Exactly.
and using those skills to your advantage.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Our sources keep coming back to Dave Canterbury's Bushcraft 101
Okay.
and his 5 C's of survivability as a kind of fundamental framework.
Yeah, the 5 C's are cutting tools, covering, combustion devices, containers, and cordage.
Okay.
And they're really the building blocks for wilderness living, like the foundation of a house.
Okay, cutting tools, covering to stay warm and dry, a way to make fire, those all make sense. But cordage?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of that as being essential.
You would be surprised how versatile cordage is. It's crucial for everything from shelter building to crafting tools to setting traps. Imagine needing to build a shelter,
Right.
create a fishing line, or even splint an injury. Cordage is your go-to solution.
So it's not just about packing a roll of rope. You're talking about knowing how to use what you find out there.
Exactly. Nature provides all sorts of materials that can be turned into strong, reliable cordage.
Wow.
It's about knowing what to look for and how to use it.
That's pretty amazing. Speaking of shelter, I think that's a natural next step.
Yeah.
All of our sources talk about shelter as this really critical role in survival.
Absolutely. Finding shelter is crucial and location is key.
Yeah.
You want a spot that provides protection from the elements,
Right.
a stable foundation, and ideally some camouflage.
Okay. So we came across some interesting shelter types. Lean-tos, debris huts, A-frames. What makes each one unique?
Well, the lean-to is really a classic for its simplicity and effectiveness. It offers excellent protection from wind and rain. The debris hut is all about insulation, like snuggling into a giant pile of leaves.
Okay.
And the A-frame offers more all-around protection, especially in colder climates.
So if you had to pick one, which would you go for?
Well, that's a tough one. Each shelter has its own advantages depending on the situation.
Right.
I would have to consider the weather conditions, the available materials, and how much time I have to build.
Okay, so let's say our shelter's secured. Now let's talk about something even more urgent. Water.
Water is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
You can go without food for a while, but dehydration sets in quickly and it can be really dangerous.
And it's not just about finding water. It's making sure it's safe to drink, right? Like a crystal clear stream might look tempting, but
Exactly. Looks can be deceiving. That clear water could be full of microscopic bacteria and parasites you don't want to mess with.
so what are our options for purifying water when we're out in the wild?
Well, boiling's the most reliable method.
Okay.
A good rolling boil for at least 1 minute will kill most harmful microorganisms.
What about those portable water filters? I've heard some good things about brands like Sawyer and Life Straw.
Those are excellent options, especially if you're on the move. They filter out bacteria and parasites, allowing you to drink directly from the water source.
I actually used a filter on a hiking trip a few years back. We ran low on water, and that filter was a lifesaver.
Yeah,
It really made me realize how important it is to be prepared, even on familiar trails.
absolutely. It's always better to be safe than
Yeah.
sorry. Now that we've covered water, let's move on to another survival essential. Food.
While water's the immediate priority, food is essential for long-term survival.
Right.
Our sources mentioned foraging for edible plants as one option, but I've got to say I've always been a little intimidated by that.
Yeah, foraging can be a great way to find sustenance in the wild, but it comes with a huge caveat.
Okay.
You need to be absolutely certain about plant identification.
Right.
Mistaking a poisonous plant for an edible one can have serious consequences.
Yeah, safety first, for sure. What about other food sources, like
Mhm.
hunting or fishing?
Yeah, those are definitely options, but they require skill and knowledge. Hunting also involves understanding and respecting local regulations.
Are there any resources for people that want to learn more about those things, like hunting and trapping?
Yeah, the Trapper's Bible is a classic guide. It's packed with information about building traps and understanding animal behavior.
Okay.
For fishing, even basic gear or improvised tools can work, but understanding local fish species and their habits is key.
Okay. All right, so we've got shelter, water, and food. Now let's move on to a topic that's both captivating and a bit daunting. fire.
Yeah, fire.
It's essential for survival, but it can also be really dangerous if it's not handled carefully.
Fire is a powerful force in the wilderness.
Yes, it is.
It provides warmth, light, a way to cook food, and even psychological comfort.
Okay.
But if mishandled, it can quickly turn into a threat.
I imagine mastering fire-starting techniques and practicing fire safety are crucial. What are the key steps to building a fire?
Well, the first step is gathering the right materials.
Okay.
Dried tinder, kindling, and fuel. Spruce trees are a great source of tinder. Their dry, resinous needles catch fire easily, almost like nature's fire starter.
I like that visual. What are some good ways to get that fire going once you've got all that material?
Well, the teepee and log cabin methods are tried and true techniques. The teepee allows for good airflow for initial ignition, while the log cabin provides stability as the fire grows.
And what about tools? Matches and lighters are convenient, but are there any more reliable options for the wilderness?
For true preparedness, you want a fire starter. The UST Blast Match or the Exotac Nano Striker are great choices. They work even in damp conditions, creating a shower of sparks that can ignite even the dampest tinder.
Wow, that sounds incredibly reliable.
But it's important to stress fire safety, especially in dry conditions.
Of course.
Clear the area around your fire, have water or dirt ready to extinguish it, and never leave a fire unattended.
Great advice. Now let's shift gears to a scenario no one wants to experience: being lost in the woods. It's a situation that can really trigger panic. What's the most important thing to do if that happens?
The most crucial thing is to stay calm.
Okay.
The worst mistake you can make is to start wandering aimlessly.
Right.
Instead, focus on staying put and making yourself safe and visible.
So how do you find your way back to familiar territory if you realize you're lost?
Well, if you have a compass and a topographic map, those are your best tools. Learn how to use them effectively before venturing out. But if you find yourself without those tools, you'll need to rely on your observation skills and knowledge of natural navigation.
Okay, that's where things get interesting. What are some ways to navigate using natural cues?
Well, the sun and stars can be excellent guides.
Okay.
In the northern hemisphere, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. At noon, it's due south. At night, the North Star, or Polaris, always points you north.
I've heard about using the Big Dipper to find the North Star. Is that a reliable method?
Absolutely. Find the Big Dipper constellation, and the two stars at the end of its bowl point directly to the North Star. You can also use natural features like rivers and streams, which often flow downhill towards larger bodies of water.
Okay.
And the terrain itself can provide clues. Ridges and valleys tend to have a consistent orientation, helping you get your bearings.
It's amazing how much nature can tell us if we know how to listen. So we found a safe spot and we're trying to get our bearings. What's next?
Signaling for help is crucial. A whistle is far more effective than yelling to attract attention, and a mirror can be used to flash sunlight towards potential rescuers.
You know, it's funny, that whistle I had as a kid, the one that drove my parents crazy, turns out it's a legitimate survival tool.
It just goes to show that sometimes the simplest tools are the most effective. Now let's talk about something vital for both survival and the well-being of the wilderness itself. Leave no trace.
I'm really glad you brought that up. It's more than just avoiding littering. It's a deeper awareness of our impact on the environment, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Leave no trace is about minimizing our impact and respecting the wilderness as visitors. We need to acknowledge that we're part of a larger ecosystem and act accordingly.
What are some specific ways we can practice leave no trace principles?
Well, it starts with simple things, like staying on designated trails to prevent soil erosion and protect vegetation.
Okay.
Choosing durable surfaces for campsites, packing out all trash, even biodegradable items.
Right.
Properly disposing of human waste.
Yeah.
And even washing dishes or ourselves with biodegradable soap should be done at least 200 feet from water sources.
Those are all great reminders, even for those of us that are just on like a day hike or a weekend camping trip.
Absolutely. Leave no trace is a philosophy we can all embrace regardless of our experience level in the outdoors.
And speaking of experience, our sources include some incredible real-life survival stories that showcase the resilience of the human spirit.
Oh, they're amazing.
These stories are more than just thrilling tales. They offer really valuable lessons about preparedness, mental fortitude, and the will to survive against the odds.
It's amazing what people can overcome.
We have the gripping story of Aaron Ralston, the hiker who was trapped by a boulder.
Oh, wow.
And Eric Lamarck, the former Olympic hockey player who got lost while snowboarding in the Sierra Nevada. Their experiences demonstrate the importance of preparation, resourcefulness, and the power of the human will.
You know, these stories are incredible, but they offer practical takeaways for all of us. What are some things we can do to prepare for potential wilderness emergencies?
Yeah, that's a great question. What do you think?
Well, always let someone know your plans. Before venturing out, tell someone you trust where you're going and when you expect to return. That way, if something happens, they can alert authorities and provide valuable information.
That's essential. What else?
Pack a well-stocked survival kit with essentials: a cutting tool, fire starter, shelter materials, water purification methods, first aid supplies, a map and compass.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize this enough. Know how to use those tools.
Exactly.
Don't just pack them and assume you'll figure it out in an emergency.
Absolutely. Practice your skills beforehand. The more you practice in a safe and controlled environment, the more prepared and confident you'll be if a real emergency arises.
And that brings us back to one of the key takeaways from our deep dive into bushcraft and survival skills. Practice is essential. It's not enough to just read about these techniques. We need to get out there and experience them firsthand. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with these skills. And remember, preparedness is a journey, not a destination. There's always something new to learn and master. So keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the challenges and rewards of connecting with the natural world. And we'll continue our deep dive into bushcraft after a short break.
That's a great point. It really highlights the personal side of all this.
Yeah.
You know, what skills resonate most with you?
Yeah.
And why?
Exactly. And it makes it clear that learning about bushcraft, it's like a continuous journey, you know? There's always more to discover, more to master. But let's get back to some of the practical skills we talked about. We were talking about shelter. And I'd love to dig a little deeper into the actual construction,
Yeah.
the techniques involved in building those shelters.
It's amazing how humans have been using natural materials to create shelter, like for centuries. Like
Yeah.
the lean-to, such a classic design. Simple, efficient.
Can you kind of walk us through the process? Like, how would you build a lean-to? What are the steps?
Okay, so first you need a sturdy branch for the ridgepole,
Okay.
like the backbone of your shelter.
Right.
You want to look for a spot where a large branch is naturally leaning against a tree or a rock formation. That's going to be your main support.
Okay, and then you create that sloping wall from the ridgepole down to the ground.
Exactly. You use smaller branches, leaning them against the ridgepole at an angle. Then you fill in the gaps with leaves, ferns, moss, anything for insulation and weatherproofing. It's like weaving a natural tapestry
Wow.
to protect yourself.
It's really incredible how nature provides everything.
Yeah.
Now, what about the debris hut? You were talking about like snuggling into a pile of leaves. How do you actually go about building one of those?
That's a little bit more involved than the lean-to, but worth it for that extra warmth.
Okay.
So you start by creating a framework, often using a tripod of sturdy branches.
Okay.
And then you pile on debris, leaves, pine needles, moss, just anything you can find to create a thick insulating layer.
So you're basically building a blanket fort,
It is.
but using nature's insulation.
Correct.
Okay. And when would an A-frame shelter be the best option?
The A-frame is perfect when you need more all-around protection, especially in those colder conditions. Think of it as a more robust lean-to with two sloping walls instead of one, creating that classic A shape. So you'll need a ridgepole and sturdy branches for the frame, and then pile on your insulating materials.
I love that. It sounds like building any of those shelters would really tap into your inner architect. Let's switch gears now to finding and purifying water. We discussed boiling.
Right.
What are some tips to make that happen out in the wild?
Well, first off, you need a suitable container.
Okay.
A metal pot is ideal, but you can improvise with natural materials. Some people even use birch bark containers,
Really?
carefully rotating them over the flames to prevent burning.
Wow, that seems tricky.
It does take practice.
What about using rocks to heat water?
Oh, yeah. That's a technique people have been using for centuries. You heat rocks in your fire
Okay.
and then carefully drop them into a container of water.
Gotcha.
Raises the temperature. But, and I can't stress this enough, safety is super important.
Yeah.
Anytime you're working with fire.
Absolutely. We also talked about those water filters. Super convenient, especially if you're on the go. What are some good brands out there?
Sawyer and LifeStraw are two really well-known brands.
Yeah.
They offer a bunch of portable filters. They're lightweight, easy to use, and really effective at removing bacteria and parasites.
So the takeaway here is don't drink untreated water in the wild.
Never.
Whether you boil it, filter it, use chemical treatment, whatever. Safety first. Speaking of risks, let's revisit fire safety for a second.
Yeah, fire demands respect.
Right.
Before you even think about striking that match, think about your surroundings, take some precautions.
So what are some things people should keep in mind when they're choosing a spot for a fire?
Well, first of all, you want to clear a wide area.
Okay.
Get rid of all those flammable materials around the fire site. If you're building a fire on the ground, you want to create a ring of rocks to contain the flames. And always have water or dirt nearby to extinguish the fire completely before you leave.
Good advice. Let's talk about navigation now. What happens if you're out there and you don't have a compass or a map?
That's when your observation skills and knowledge of natural navigation becomes super important. The sun, the stars, even the landscape itself can give you really valuable clues.
Okay, let's start with the sun. How can we use the sun to find our way?
We all know the sun rises in the east and sets in the west.
Right.
But did you know that at noon, the sun is due south in the northern hemisphere?
Oh, interesting. So if you know what time it is, you can use the sun to figure out direction.
Exactly.
Okay. What about the stars?
On a clear night, the stars are like your compass. In the northern hemisphere, the North Star, or Polaris, points you north.
And how do you find the North Star? There are so many stars up there.
Locate the Big Dipper constellation. The two stars at the end of the Dipper's bowl point directly to the North Star.
Oh, okay. What about the landscape? Can you use natural features for navigation?
You bet. Rivers and streams often flow downhill towards larger bodies of water. So if you can determine which way the water's flowing, that can help you get your bearings. And the terrain itself can be helpful. Ridges and valleys often have a consistent orientation. That can help you get your bearings.
It's fascinating how much we can learn just by observing our surroundings. It's like nature's giving us directions if we know how to listen.
Yeah.
Okay, let's circle back to leave no trace for a minute. It's such an important philosophy that guides our actions in the wild.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that we're part of this bigger ecosystem and our actions have an impact.
Exactly.
We have a responsibility to minimize that impact and preserve these wild places.
So how can we put leave no trace into practice? What are some specific ways to minimize our footprint?
Stay on designated trails to prevent soil erosion. Choose durable surfaces for your campsite.
Okay.
Pack out all trash, even biodegradable items.
You're right.
Dispose of human waste properly.
Yeah.
And even when you're washing dishes or yourself, do it at least 200 feet from water sources.
Those are great tips
Yeah.
for anyone venturing out into the wilderness.
It's about respecting nature,
Yeah.
minimizing our footprint.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to those inspiring survival stories that we were talking about, the ones that really show the power of the human spirit. We mentioned Aaron Ralston and Eric Lamarck. Let's dive a little deeper into their stories.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Aaron, the hiker who was trapped by that boulder, is a real testament to the power of sheer will.
It's just incredible.
I can't imagine being in that situation. And his story highlights how important it is to stay calm and focused.
Absolutely.
Even when you're facing fear, what stands out to you from Aaron's experience?
His resourcefulness. He didn't give up hope. He really assessed his situation, rationed his supplies, and he found a way to free himself. It's incredible.
Yeah, a true testament to the human will to live. And then we have Eric Lamarck, lost for 8 days in the Sierra Nevada. Facing frostbite, hunger, the elements, he still managed to find his way to safety. What are the lessons we can learn from his experience?
You know, Eric's story reminds us that even in the most desperate situations, hope and ingenuity can make a difference. He used his knowledge to build shelters and even made a makeshift compass to help find his way.
These stories are so extraordinary.
They are.
But they really offer practical takeaways for us.
Right.
You know, even if we never face anything that extreme, what are some things we can do to prepare for, potential emergencies in the wilderness?
Always let someone know your plans.
Okay.
Before you go out, tell someone you trust where you're going, when you expect to be back. So something happens, they can alert the authorities.
That's so important. What else?
Pack a survival kit, with essentials. A cutting tool, fire starter, shelter materials, water purification, first aid supplies, a map and compass.
And I can't emphasize this enough. Know how to use that stuff.
Yes.
Don't just pack it and assume you'll figure it out when you need it.
Exactly. Practice your skills. Practice them beforehand. The more you practice in a safe, controlled environment, the better prepared you'll be. The more confident you'll be if an emergency happens.
It all comes back to that key takeaway. Practice is key. You can't just read about it. You got to get out there and experience it.
Right.
The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll be with those skills. And remember, preparedness, it's not a destination, it's a journey. There's always more to learn. So keep exploring, stay curious, and really embrace those challenges and rewards of connecting with nature.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring bushcraft and survival. And before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, that power of the human spirit.
Yeah, it really is incredible how even when facing danger and uncertainty, the human spirit shines through.
Absolutely. We were talking about Aaron Ralston and Eric Lamarck. Their stories are really worth revisiting. Aaron trapped by a boulder, making that unimaginable choice in order to survive. It's such a powerful reminder to stay calm.
To stay focused, even when you're facing like intense fear.
It's easy to just give up when you're in that kind of situation.
Yeah. What's something that stands out to you from Aaron's story?
I think his resourcefulness. He didn't give up hope. He just carefully looked at everything, figured out what he had, rationed his supplies, and then ultimately found a way to free himself.
It's just amazing. It really shows the human will to live. And then there's Eric Lamarck. He was lost for 8 days.
8 days.
In the Sierra Nevada, battling frostbite and hunger. I mean, just the elements. Yeah. And he still made it back.
It's amazing.
It's incredible. So what can we learn from his experience?
Eric's story, I think, reminds us that even in the most desperate situations, ingenuity and hope can make all the difference. He used his knowledge to build shelters, even created a makeshift compass.
Wow.
To help him find his way.
Wow. These stories are so extraordinary.
They are.
But they offer such practical lessons for all of us, even if we never face anything quite that extreme.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here into bushcraft and wilderness survival, what are some final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, I would say remember those 5 C's of survivability.
Okay.
Cutting tools, covering, combustion devices, containers, and cordage. Yeah. They're like the foundation.
The essentials.
Yes. And always, always, always prioritize safety. Respect the power of fire. Never drink untreated water. And always be aware of your surroundings.
Such great advice. And remember, bushcraft is more than just surviving. It's about really connecting with nature.
Absolutely.
Understanding its rhythms. Appreciating its beauty.
It's about learning to thrive in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Using your skills and knowledge to live in harmony with nature.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of bushcraft and wilderness survival. We hope you've learned some new things and maybe have a renewed appreciation for the power of, human resilience.
And remember, preparedness is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, keep exploring, stay curious, never stop learning. Until next time, stay safe out there.
Yeah.